Hello and welcome back to another episode of Survive the Wild, Be Prepared. Today's episode, bunkers, shelters, fallout shelters, whatever you want to call them. A safe place to be when the bombs drop. Let's go straight into it. Are they worth it? That is a really big question and there are many things to consider. If we are talking a World War III scenario, one, do you necessarily want to survive that? Like I said before, nukes are going to be the utter and last resort. So a shelter in that kind of sort of scenario is actually probably a good idea. If you can bury it at the deep end underground, so that any bombs that fall nearby and debris that's going around and flying around, you're going to be safe from. If you get a direct hit, unless it's really deep, it's probably going to destroy your shelter. The flimsy Anderson shelters in the Second World War, many people succumbed to, they were just killed outright because the bomb missed the house, landed in the garden and created a massive crater in the garden, and it killed whoever was in the shelter. It might have even killed the people that was in the garden of the shelter next door. So let's assume that you want a shelter. The first thing is, when you've got your shelter is, or even when you're building your shelter in your back garden and it's going to be deep, tell you, if the neighbours start asking questions, tell them it's a septic tank that you're installing. You're going off grid and you're installing a septic tank and a water tank to collect rainwater. Because if they know that you've got a bunker, they're going to want to be in it. If you remember that episode of The Simpsons where Ned Flanders was the only guy in town that had a fallout shelter, and there was a knock at the door and the entire town was waiting outside saying, "We don't have shelterinis." So yeah, that's one thing. It starts then getting complicated in terms of there's a lot to actually cover in this topic. There's a lot to think about, there's a lot to consider, because it's effectively, depending on the scenario, like I say, if it's just conventional weapons that are falling around, there's air raid sirens going off or you're getting warnings on your phone, as we do these days. I think there's a test coming up next month actually. Then it's doable. You can go out when in between time, you can maybe make repairs to your property if necessary, or at least help secure it. There's still some level of normality that kind of can happen on a day-to-day basis. If it is a nuclear world war, that is a completely different scenario. You've got probably two scenarios in that. Maybe one or two bombs before governments go, hold on, this has gone too far. Too many people have died. Look at the destruction. Look at the environmental destruction that we've done. Oh, one of the battery lights have just gone. But hopefully it's not too bad. Then the shelter becomes, a good idea. Particularly if you was nearish by a detonation. Because you definitely want to be underground and away from any fallout for at least definitely the first 48 hours. Realistically, 2 weeks. So having enough supplies to last that length of time, that's what you would want to be aiming for. And then after about 2 weeks, you can then go out and then kind of start making repairs, trying to get back to maybe some sort of normality, depending on the political situation and what happens. People might be getting evacuated. You might probably well have to be evacuated because, there might not be very much around you to sustain anything anyway. Let's face it. The extreme side of it is the bombs just keep flying. and there's thousands of nuclear weapons. In that case, then there's a good chance you're looking at a nuclear winter. Now, from scientific models that have been created, you're looking at temperatures dropping, because when they say nuclear winter, they mean like winter, like a mini ice age. Like I said, depending on the amount of radioactivity and the fallout, it could be months, it could be a couple of years before the radioactivity is actually safe. It depends. If it's rained a lot, then a lot of the radioactivity will get washed away, probably out to sea eventually. There'll still be concentrations of it, but it's the winter element of it, because the amount of soot that gets drawn up into way above the cloud level where weather happens, and it'll stay up there for a long time. It'll take a long time before it permeates out, and enough sunlight is getting down to the ground to allow plants to grow. This is the scary part, really, because within the first couple of weeks, any vegetation that hasn't been incinerated is going to die through lack of sunlight, and the temperature is going to start dropping severely. We're probably looking at temperatures below -40 for anywhere up to 5 to 8 years, at which point it might start warming up. But because of the amount of ice coverage and snow that'll be around, even at 10 years, let's say the sky's clear, pretty much the entire northern hemisphere is going to be covered in snow, which is white. That reflects energy back out into space, so it's going to take a long time before it actually gets warm enough to start growing plants again. It could be another 10 years, it could be another 20 years, depending on various different things. It might spark a new ice age, and then you're looking at maybe thousands, of years. In that scenario, if you're lucky enough to live on Australia, South Africa, the southern half of America, New Zealand, then you've got a fairly decent chance, actually, and maybe some of the Indonesian islands as well. So you're looking definitely south of the equator. Is your best bet on that score. But going back to shelters, practically in that scenario, is it worth it? And a few people I've spoken to said they would rather just get vaporised rather than have to go through that and maybe slowly die. On a practical scale, you've got, let's say, 10 years. That's 10 years worth of food, 10 years worth of water, and depending on how you're going to power the appliances that you're going to run, and they're going to be bare minimum, so you're looking at things like air filtration, water filtration, lighting, maybe a hydroponic system to carry on growing food for a period of, for as long as you can. I think when you consider everything that you've got to power, you're going to need at least a 10 kVA diesel generator. I say diesel because diesel is more efficient than petrol. It burns more efficiently. So yeah, 10 kVA generator will give you about 8 kilowatt hours worth of output. I've looked into the fuel efficiency, and this is obviously assuming that it's going to run at the best efficiency through its lifetime. So you're going to have to regularly service this thing. So depending on the load, which is the amount of electricity that you're drawing, you're going to use anywhere between 2.5 to 4 litres of diesel a day, which actually, doesn't sound too bad. But then that's about 1,450 litres a year, which is obviously 14,500 litres for 10 years. That's a lot of fuel to be storing on top of your water, food. Yeah. That's a lot. There's another thing as well. I mean, you've got to consider sanitation. Where do you flush your waste? You could, like I said, you could use it. It's composting it, but yeah. What I would do is, I mean, forget about solar. That's not going to work because there's no sun. It's covered with a big thick layer of soot in the atmosphere. I would have a wind-powered generator that I could install quickly after it's all gone, so like in a few weeks. So I'd maybe have a generator to last me a certain length of time. I'd probably start off with batteries. I'd maybe have a battery bank, and then a generator to get you through maybe the first month or two. And then I'd be looking at trying to install a wind turbine, an 8 to 10 kilowatt wind turbine that you can then couple up to the battery storage, the batteries that you've got, so you could recharge those batteries. Because let's face it, the wind doesn't blow all the time. When the wind blows, that takes me back. I remember that film. That film scared a lot of kids. It's like it was done by the same guy that made the Snowman. Yeah. Anyway, bit of nostalgia there. So yeah, these are things that you've got to think about. Like I say, if you weren't going to filter water or recycle your water, the amount of water you'd need would be around, I think it's about you'd need 10,000 gallons just for two people. Sorry, 10,000, just over 10,000 litres, sorry, for two people. Now if you've got a family of 4, that's double that. That's like 22,000 litres. Food. You've got to consider the amount of food that you can eat. I did a video on food storage recently and food to store. If you went on the absolute bare minimum for a woman needs 1,200 calories, for a man needs 1,500 calories. This is absolute and utter bare minimum, without exerting any effort, pretty much any effort whatsoever. That's just to exist. That's to keep off starvation. To keep healthy, you go through the recommended ones. So it's 2,000 for a woman, 2,500 for a man, and depending on your size as well. Being able to store that amount of food for that length of time, without being able to maybe subsidise it by, like say, hydroponics. You could grow mushrooms, for instance. In fact, mushrooms would be a sort of ideal because you've got a very stable environment. But the other thing you've got to think about is the location of your fallout shelter or bunker. If it's going to be really close to buildings, okay, let's assume that you're at home when a bomb goes off. You can get you get an alert. You can get into your shelter straight away. The pressure wave is going to blast most of the buildings, particularly if it's a near issue within 5 to 10, 15 miles. Most of the buildings are going to collapse. Can you get out later on because of the debris that's fallen down? So you've got to think of proximity of the buildings around you. You've also got to think of the ground. So if you've got fairly loose ground, let's say you've got sandy soil, deep sandy soil, and you bury your bunker, what happens if the water table rises and you're effectively in a giant bubble that's full of air? It's going to float. The pressure will lift it out of the ground. Trust me, it will. So there's ways you can get around that. You could put a concrete base down, tie it down to that, but you'd probably have to put concrete piles that go deeper. And that doesn't matter if it's a concrete box or a steel box. And then that then takes me to the materials that you make it out of. If you can get pre-built, almost like shipping containers. You dig a hole, you plant it in, they weld it all up, all the gaps, and you fit it out. They cost tens of thousands of pounds. There are quite a few companies out there that do it. Now, if you're in a very free drain, if the soil that you're in or the ground that it's in is a very free draining, it's still going to be damp, but you've got to line the hole. You've then got to make sure that there's an adequate coating all around the exterior and the interior, because it's cool down here. I'm in my basement, it's about 13 degrees. I can see my breath. That moisture, is when it touches a colder surface like the walls, it will condense into water. That's going to create corrosion. So it's going to have to be lined, protected, like with some very highly water resistant paint. Bitumen would be a good one for the exterior. You'd maybe want to put some sort of like softer material like sand over it to cushion against when you backfill. You could backfill it with concrete as well, that'd be quite good. But yeah, and going back on the temperature, yes, it's a stable temperature. It fluctuates. I think in winter it got down to 10 degrees down here. That's fairly cold. It's great for storing food in. I don't own a fridge. I've got a freezer. I've got a chest freezer there, and that's it. Because all my fresh stuff I keep on a cold slab in there. I tend to buy, in terms of like meat, fish, stuff like that, I buy anything that I'll use within about 2 to 3 days. It keeps fine. Sometimes a little bit more. My milk all gets stored down here. I don't have a fridge. I've been here a year. Haven't needed one so far. So yeah, there's those things to consider. And when it comes to the storage space that you're going to need for all this will determine how big the shelter needs to be. That will run on a few things. One, how long you plan to be in the shelter for. That then determines everything else. So the amount of food that you need, the amount of water that you need, if you're going to fuel it with liquid dinosaur, you're going to need storage space for that. You're going to need an area for the generator. The generator needs access to fresh air. You need access to fresh air. So you need to be able to have either air purification system, which will be extremely expensive and fancy, where you can basically do carbon capture on a small scale, like they do on the International Space Station. That's likely not going to be possible. You can make air with water if you've got electricity, because you can split. If you run an electric current through water, you would want to use something like platinum though, for the contacts, or gold, something that's not going to have any reaction whatsoever, because if you use stuff like stainless steel, it produces some pretty nasty gases and you don't want to be breathing in that. But you can separate the hydrogen out. You could use the hydrogen, and then you could separate the oxygen out to create oxygen. Now, if you burn the two back together, it creates water. So you could have a certain amount of water that will sustain like a chain reaction, but not in that sense. It'll be like a circulating thing. So that's one way you could do. The other thing is you're going to have to pipe in air from outside, and then you're going to have to filter that. through series of filters, and probably your first filter will have to be you'll have to have some way of being able to change that filter, because there'll be a concentration of radioactive particles on that. So you need to be able to change that filter in and out without coming into contact with it, and ideally without having to get too close to it as well, because it'll be giving off alpha particles, beta particles, and probably some gamma rays as well. Now you can suit up actually and protect yourself from the alpha and beta particles. There's not a lot you can do about the gamma rays, but ideally you don't want to be anywhere near it, so you need to be able to change that filter system. That would have to be some sort of unit that you can maybe seal off, so you can change that out, discard it, maybe it gets thrown into a pit, or it's definitely you would need to seal it up into some sort of bag, and then disposed of, never to be dug up again. Yeah, water, you could get away with not having to have a huge amount of water if you plan things. So if you got hold of a still, so you can distill your urine, so you'd be separating the salts from your urine and the urea that's in urine, because under no circumstances do you drink urine. I know there's a few popular survivalists out there, one particularly springs to mind, who quite enjoys drinking from the golden shower, but no, you don't. You're just going to end up concentrating the extra amount of salts in your body, which is going to dehydrate you quicker, and the urea is going to have not pleasant effects on the old noggin. Your kidneys will not like you whatsoever either. Eventually you'll die if you start drinking urine, even out of desperation. No, just do not do it. It will make you dehydrate faster. But you can, like I say, you can distill it, so you can separate the water out of it by evaporating it off, separating it out, or you can use a reverse osmosis filter. You can get them from marine shops. Some marine shops will sell them as part of a survival kit, particularly if you're doing long yachting, where you maybe can't carry enough water. You can get them, and they turn seawater into drinking water. Tastes a little bit on the weird side apparently, but you can do it. I think you can buy electronic kits that will do it. It'll pump it through. It does require a bit of pressure. Soyuz filters, or like them life straws, they would be handy to have, because if you're storing water, there's the potential, even if you sterilise it out to the best of your ability, you can get chemicals you can add to water to help store it, but you'd still, for a long period of time, you'd probably still want to at least filter and probably boil that water. Yeah, and incidentally, you could use the hydrogen to heat water or heat a space, even. You might want to go online and do some calculations though, because sometimes if you ignite hydrogen in let's say you've got your hydrogen generator going, and you've got an excess amount of oxygen in your immediate atmosphere, and you have a form of ignition, it might go bang, like the atmosphere, it might go bang. Won't end well. So you'd have to be careful. You'd probably, I would at that point, having some sort of air quality monitor that monitors the amount of oxygen that's in the atmosphere. You want to keep it sort of like at a normal level, and then you'll be fine. If it exceeds, I don't know what the amount would be, but if it would exceed a certain amount, too much oxygen, yeah, you're going to end up being a bit toasty. God, there's so many things to think about, and the majority of it boils down to money. If you're rich, yeah, okay, you could do it. If the vast majority of people, aren't too strapped for cash, particularly at the moment. I mean, I'm trying to do this place up on a bit of a shoestring. I work ridiculous hours. Slowly getting there, but one step at a time. So doing a lot of these things is going to be either impossible or impractical. So it boils down to the whole question of, is a fallout shelter, a bunker, worth it? Really and truly, it all boils down to your personal circumstances and opinion. Never underestimate the will to survive. That is one thing I have learnt. But yeah, if you could do it, do it. I would recommend it. I mean, it would certainly increase the value of any property. And if nothing happens, I mean, God forbid anything happens, but if nothing happens, the worst thing is you've got more space for either storage, or you could turn it into a man cave. You could even have your own little cinema. Possibilities are endless within the confined space. But yeah, I mean, if I was going to do this place, it would cost me thousands, particularly because I can't do it in the garden, it's too small. I would have to dig down. That means I'd have to underpin the entire property, put a concrete base in, put a thick concrete roof in to support any of the weight of the building above me that might, if it collapsed. So we're probably looking at least 8 inches of reinforced concrete, if not 12 inches of reinforced concrete. That would do it. Then you've got to support the weight of that below. So then you've got to dig. Probably have to have a few extra pillars. Probably 3 decent size concrete reinforced pillars. Each corner, midway, and then at the end. And then, yeah, I can't do that. It's too expensive. It'd be nice to be able to do that. Possibility, if I could extend into the garden, and I get at least this space again. That could just be used for storage. But yeah. So I thought I'd touch on things to consider. And these are all things that you would have to think about. These are the practicalities. I've probably missed loads because there's so much to cover. Effectively, you're encasing yourself in an environment similar to if you were under the sea, on the moon, or Mars, for instance. Actually, Mars would be quite a decent sort of comparison, apart from the lack of oxygen. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, throw them in the comment box below. If you think I've missed anything which would be useful for other people, throw them in the comment box below. Give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. If not, give it a thumbs down. And yeah, stay safe. Fingers crossed, everything will be okay. I think, all in all, I don't think there'll be a nuclear war, but there's definitely the high potential for something happening, just because of how everything's going at this moment in time. I might do a little video on how I believe that we are heading, or why we are heading towards what we're heading towards, possible World War III. It's actually hard to even say the words because we've lived in relative peace for such a long time, like since the Cold War, particularly here in Europe. we haven't really had to think about this, so having to think about it's a bit but yeah, anyway, hope you've enjoyed it, hope you've learned something, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.